Morning and welcome. A call to order, Muskogee Creek National Council, pre-agenda, March 27th, 2021. Time is 9:02. This time, I'd like to ask Representative James Jennings to do the invocation, please.
Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you in prayer this morning, asking God to be with us as we conduct the business of the nation. Father, we ask that you be with those that are sick. Father, we ask that you be with those that have lost loved ones and are in time of sadness and grief. Father, we ask all these things in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Jennings. Roll call, National Council Secretary Christy Jackson.
Speaker Randall Hicks.
Present.
Mary Crawford. Present. Joyce Steer.
Present.
Patrick Freeman.
Here.
Joseph Hicks.
Here.
Robert Huff.
Present.
James Jennings.
Here.
Adam Jones. Adam Jones. William Lowe.
Here.
Anna Marshall.
Present.
Charles McHenry.
Here.
Thomasina Holla Osborne.
Present.
Daryl Proctor.
Here.
Mark Randolph.
Present.
Travis Scott.
Here.
Lucian Tiger III.
Present.
Speaker at 15 present, 1 absent.
15 present, 1 absent constitutes a quorum. All business conducted will be official. Agenda review, health, education, and welfare. Chairman Lucian Tiger III.
Thank you, Speaker. We have no additions.
Thank you, Representative Tiger. Land, natural resources, cultural preservation. Chairman Mark Randolph.
No, Speaker, we have no additions.
Thank you, Representative Randolph. Business, finance, and justice. Chairman William Lowe.
No, Speaker. We have no additions.
Thank you, Chairman Lowe. Next item on the agenda is other business. This morning we have 2 interviews. First interview will be Miranda Carmen, Secretary of Community and Human Services. Ms. Carmen, if you would come to the podium. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you, Speaker.
Ms. Carmen, if you would share with the National Council your education, background, and experience for this position, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be speaking with you all today. I'm Miranda Carmen. I am UGN enrolled Creek. I am the granddaughter of Ada Tiger. My paternal grandparents are Willie and Frances Carmen, and my parents are Lori Carmen and the late Les Carmen. I grew up in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. I graduated high school from there and received a scholarship to play softball at Connor State College. I finished my associate's degree there and went on to Oklahoma State University to finish my bachelor's in sociology. I was accepted into the School of Social Work at the University of Oklahoma on the Norman campus, and I completed my master's in social work in 2007. My first job out of grad school was counseling couples in Oklahoma City at a counseling agency, and all of the couples were expecting their first child. Soon after that, I applied to the Muskogee Creek Nation Behavioral Health, and I was a therapist there. I provided clinical services at the Eufaula Clinic, the Okmulgee Clinic, the Okemah Clinic, and the Sapulpa Clinic to adults, adolescents, and children. After my role at Muskogee Creek Nation, my husband and I decided to relocate to Virginia, and I took a counseling job at a private agency there. Soon after, I applied to the federal government at IHS headquarters and was hired as a public health advisor. In that position, I served as project officer of the domestic violence and sexual assault grantees, and was there for a little over 3 years. I had my 2 youngest sons during that time and decided to take some time off from work to be with them. We eventually decided to move back to Oklahoma, I took a job as grants coordinator at the Muskogee Creek Nation Behavioral Health, overseeing the Garrett Lee Smith Suicide Prevention Grant. In that time that I was there, we successfully implemented the crisis text line, Text Creek, to 741-741. I was also the primary clinician that provided suicide intervention services using the collaborative assessment and management of suicidality. When we would hear or get calls of patients that were experiencing suicidal ideation, I would do the assessment and then determine if there was a higher level of care needed. During my time as grants coordinator, approximately in 2016, my middle son was diagnosed with autism. I was faced with a very difficult decision at that time. My current job at the time with Creek Nation did not cover the ABA services or applied behavioral analysis services that he needed. And I was faced with a difficult decision because he needed the services right away. At the time, Oklahoma hadn't passed a legislative mandate to require health insurance plans to provide this service, so I went on the hunt looking for a company that had a health insurance plan that would cover his services. So given that I did not have the therapy that he needed, I was only able to locate a couple of companies that actually covered the therapy at the time, and the federal government was one of those. I applied to the federal government, and I currently hold the position that I applied to in 2016. I serve as the mental health lead at IHS headquarters. I've been in this role for 4.5 years, and I've worked remotely from BEGS. The majority of my experience as the mental health lead has been providing oversight to the Behavioral Health Integration Initiative, which Muskogee Creek Nation is a grant recipient of that. I also oversee federal contracts for training and technical assistance for grantees, and I oversee federal contracts that provide clinical training to clinicians in the field of behavioral health. So that's pretty much across Indian country. If confirmed, my priorities would include, number one, improving and streamlining the social service program to make sure that when citizens reach out that we respond promptly. I think that's very important. Number two would be increasing our internal capacity for our foster and adopt program. I really truly believe that we need to make it a priority to recruit new families and find innovative ways to support those newly recruited families so that we can take care of our own children. The third priority would be exploring new funding opportunities to create new programming that would eventually allow us to expand our programming, but also allow us to build our internal capacity and the infrastructure that's needed to provide services without any outside help. I truly believe that my life experience and educational experience, along with my professional experience, has brought me here today, and I look forward to working with you all if I'm confirmed. Mado, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Carmen? Representative Randolph.
Good morning, Ms. Carmen.
Morning.
I have a question that's kind of twofold. I'd like to know how you deal with conflict. I want to give you a scenario. If you consistently get complaints on the same employee, same individual, what would you do?
Could you tell me where the complaints would come from? Internal, external, both?
complaints from citizens centering around on quality service and quality contact.
Yes, thank you for that question. I definitely have experience in conflict resolution and providing supervision to employees. I would bring the employee in and have a discussion with them about what those complaints were and make sure that we address whatever those complaints were, that we would definitely want to make sure that they're performing at the optimal level. And if they're not, then we would look at a plan to correct those issues.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Randolph. Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Carmen, you're currently employed out of Maryland or Virginia, but you live here in Beggs, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
So you wouldn't be requesting a relocation bonus? All right,
No, sir.
thank you. Another question I have is, have you worked with any of the staff that are currently employed?
I'm trying to. Are you talking specifically for community and human services?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I have not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Jennings. Representative Osborne.
Thank you, Speaker. Ms. Carmen, one of the things you mentioned was recruiting foster families. What are your plans to retain those foster families?
I've given this quite a bit of thought. Thank you for that question. I really hope that with all of your support and with the support of the administration, that we can look at innovative ways to keep those families, providing them with training, providing them with whatever supplies that they may need. I think we really need to take a hard look at what are we currently doing right now, and then how can we increase whatever we're doing so that it's not a burden for the family, but that they have everything that they need to take care of the children.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Osborne. Speaker Rice. Representative Lowe.
Hello, Ms. Miranda. Thank you for being here today. Pleasure to finally meet you. One thing I would ask is, from your observation living in Beggs and really hearing and listening to what the department actually does, or, you know, we all hear good and bad things, of course. What's one of the immediate needs you would fix, or what would be your priority once you got in the position if you were confirmed?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and thank you for that question. I think the first thing is taking a look at our phone system, because I know that I've heard in several instances where people are reaching out and they cannot get a hold of anyone, or no one's returning their phone call. And so I think that would be one of the number one things that I would want to take a look at, is making sure that whatever phone system that we have, and whatever technology that's in place right now, that it's meeting the needs of the citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lowe. Representative Hicks.
Good morning, Ms. Miranda. Question I got, it's a pretty simple question. As far as for the employees you work with, are you respectful and fair to your employees, or do you have a lot of conflicts with your employees?
I'd say I'm definitely fair and respectful. I enjoy working with all of my colleagues. I look forward to working with the directors if confirmed. I know that they have their own subject matter expertise in the areas that they are overseeing, and I welcome the input from them on whatever innovative ideas that they have, and I'm just looking forward to being a part of the team.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. Ms. Carmen, I have a question for you.
Yes, Speaker.
I know you spoke about behavioral health, social work. There's one program that was within this program that seems like it often gets overlooked, and it's child care. What kind of experience do you have in child care?
I do have experience prior to, I would say, starting my education in childcare. I would say one of the pieces that I have been trained in as a clinician is parent-child interaction therapy. I also have knowledge of the importance of early childhood screenings and making sure that developmental disabilities are identified very early on. So I think that would be one of the things that I look at is how are we providing resources to parents so that they can monitor the child's meeting the milestones, and then also making sure that the learning opportunities within the child care center are appropriate for the ages.
Okay, thank you. Council, you have any other questions?
Well,
Representative Lowe.
no, Speaker. Miss Miranda, the reason we're here is confirmation today. Could you just give us your elevator pitch on why we should confirm you today, please?
Thank you for that question. I really appreciate the opportunity to be standing before you today. I would be very humbled to serve in this role. The citizens would be my top priority every day. All citizens would be my top priority every day. I have a heart for this work. I've worked I feel like my entire life preparing for this work, and I will work for you all. I will work for the people, and I will work for the children that are not currently in Native homes, but so that we can bring them back home.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lowe.
Speaker.
Representative Hicks.
Ms. Carmen, I got one more question for you. Could you tell me what you feel is your biggest weakness as far as anything within your job, whatever?
I would say that one of my biggest weaknesses is probably multitasking, and making sure that I don't multitask too much, but really spend time when needed on making sure that we're delivering outcomes and that we're very results driven. So that's something that I continue to work on in my professional career, is to make sure that my multitasking is not something that is keeping me from achieving outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. Council, any more questions for Ms. Carmen? Second Speaker Proctor.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen, for being here today with us. Going through your resume, you have the education and background and everything. It's very impressive, and things you have accomplished. I know a lot of interviews that we've gone through, a lot of these questions may be behavioral type on how you respond and react. And what is your management style? Are you approachable? If someone disagrees with you, are you the one that says this is my final directive, or are you willing to be approachable and talk it out if it's something that you could? I wouldn't say. I know you would have it. I can't think of a scenario, but if it is something that you are really compassionate about, this McGirt ruling, I know there's going to be a lot of talk about that. It's not necessarily a question. I'm just saying, how can you tell the nation in our McGirt ruling and how we talked about children, the Children Welfare Act, and how can you go up against the state? Are you familiar with what we're going through now?
Yes,
I'm sure
yes,
you
sir.
are. We all are well
Yes,
over
sir.
that. Would you be able to talk for the nation and in our stance on this, and be firm and let the state know where we're at on this?
Thank you for the question. The first part, I think on my managerial style and leadership style, I would say is shared leadership partly, and then authoritarian secondly. I really believe in working alongside the directors. They're the subject matter expertise in their areas. And so I definitely would want to work alongside them. But at the same time, I think that staff have to be held accountable for the results. And so finding a blend and finding a balance for that. The second part is, yes, I definitely would be willing to go as a representative of the tribe to speak to the state and to let them know what we're thinking as far as the McGirt ruling goes, and that we continue to make strides to bring our children back home. I think working in stages, identifying what that plan may look like, and I won't know for sure, what the details are until I'm in the role, but I definitely think that we need to strategize and have a plan, and that we would definitely be making sure that we're working towards bringing our children back home and not relying on the state.
All right. Thank you. I got one more question. You were manager over a department or where you employed at now. What would you say your employees would say to you? What would they say about you?
I think that they would say that they enjoy working with me, that I'm always helpful, that I'm always mission driven, and I'm there to serve the people in whatever role that I have. Yeah, I think that I get along with all of my colleagues, so I don't think that they would have anything negative to say.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Second Speaker Proctor. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Speaker. I don't have a question for you, Ms. Carmen, but I just have a comment that I appreciate you as a citizen and a mother trying to tackle this task because your plate will be full if you're confirmed. And, sitting here listening to your interview, I appreciate your honesty and your resume speaks for itself, and I don't see any reason why I can't support you. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Speaker.
Representative Tiger.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a question for Chief Hill. Chief Hill, what is the proposed salary for this position? And what is the salary for the Deputy Director position? Okay, so the current salary right now for the Deputy Director for Community and Human Service is about 70,000, you would say? All right, thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Tiger. Any other discussion?
Speaker.
Representative Marshall.
Yes. Ms. Carmen, you mentioned that you'll serve the citizens. My question is, how will you work with the council?
I am definitely interested in working with all of you, hearing what you would deem as, I guess, the most pertinent issues coming from whatever community that you represent. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you, and I look forward to working alongside you to do whatever we can to make our nation stronger.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen, and thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Marshall.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Carmen. Ms. Carmen, you're fine. At 10 o'clock, we'll start our regular session, and then you can come back in, and that's when you'll be voted on. Okay, next we have Ms. Sarah Price, Secretary of Education, Employment and Training. Good morning, Ms. Price. Ms. Price, Please share with the National Council your education, background, and experience for this position, please.
Este Estongo, Sarah Price, Johojif Gross. Yashkoshit, Jehoma, Wheatis. Mahayadoet, Jafigi Thulthin. Bomastalgi, Bone Ho Boydalgi. Imadoket, Imanazet, Jafashkoshi, Jahayados. Good morning. My name is Sarah Price. I stand in front of you very humbled. I am a teacher in my heart, and I'm very happy to be here to work for our people and help our children. I really began my educational background in Dewar. I graduated, went there almost my whole life. I was a JOM tutor, and I tutored our Hobodagan, our native students there as a high school student myself. My mom owned a daycare, and I loved working for the children, and so I went to, after I graduated high school in 2000, I was married the same year to my husband of 21 years, Steve. We have a son, Lakota, that is 7. I began my educational, professional time at Union in Tulsa, where I was an educator for 4 years, and I received 5 professional individual grants myself that I wrote, and one of those took me to Columbia University to study at their teachers' college there during the summer. And it was there that I realized that there was something missing with me, and it wasn't solely in my professional journey, it was in my life as well. And although my dad is Muskogee, I was not connected to our people as I was really realizing as an adult that I should be. I was also realizing there was a lack of Native education in public schools. You know, I lived closely to the complex, and although I hadn't been raised traditionally, I also had really no knowledge about our people from schools or those things. However, I do know now that, you know, I've came to realize that all my inherent beliefs and knowledge sets and, you know, epistemologies that we learn about in our doctoral program are all, in fact, indigenous. And so I began, you know, charting my way back home here to the nation. I was a teacher, and I had a moment of clarity there, you know, in New York City into 2012, and said, okay, I want to go back and work for our people. That is my path, and I set to do that. So I came back and immediately applied for graduate school. Prior to that, just so you're aware, I graduated from Tulsa Community College with an associate's in liberal arts. I then went to Northeastern State University here and graduated with a bachelor's in elementary education. So then in 2015, I graduated with my master's degree in education from Oklahoma State University. I've since attended ceremonies at Duck Creek, Tallahassee, Arbica, Iron Post, and I do want to mention very quickly that I gave you everyone should have a little folder, and on the side you'll see a picture that was in a calendar. That is Arbica Tribal Town in 1942, and the young woman in the white dress is my grandmother, Island Daniel. And she was a member at Arbica Tribal Town, and I always hear so many great things about what a kind person she was, and I just wanted to highlight her because I feel like I always carry her with me. My Pujahi was also a preacher at Salt Creek Baptist Church for many years. My parents, David Dunsey and Rita Dunsey, still live in Dewar, and I'll be visiting them later this afternoon. But leading back to here, I graduated in 2015, but along that way I had realized, again, wanting to work here, I needed to go out and reach out. So I came back and started shaking hands. I went to the college, introduced myself. I came here and introduced myself to many people. And at that time, Wayne Johnson was the Secretary of Education. I had long conversations with him, and He asked me then if I was interested in a Head Start position, and of course I was, having worked with young children. And so I worked in that managerial position for about 6 months, and then from there I transitioned into a research specialist for a brief moment in time when we had received our state tribal education grant, partnership grant. During that time, I also co-wrote our tribal education department grant through the BIE, and that was awarded. So in 2016, I started working again for those federal grants, and since that time, I have directed 4 federal grants, including a new one that I co-wrote, our Accessing Choices and Education grant, which is worth $4.3 million over the next 5 years. And that was with some consultants and things that we've been working with that have been mentors to myself. And we started working through tribal education capacity building. So you'll notice in your little handout that I have here, I just wanted to quickly show you a few things there. All of the work that we do is research-based, but also knowing that there's not a lot of Muskogee research about our own, what works for our specific students, the Native students in Oklahoma. And so we really wanted to build upon what we know as Muskogee people that would help our students. So in doing so, I also wrote, moving to, I believe it's the 3rd page, this Intertribal Council of the 5 Civilized Tribes resolution in January 2019. I advocated at the state level, and you'll notice that the ask here was to recommend the addition of a tribal affiliation and other data elements at the State Department regarding student management and data collection. And I'm happy to report that just this month, House Bill 1104 has passed. It's headed to the Senate to include and mandate that all schools in Oklahoma include tribal affiliation data in their student management system. So rather than just reporting, we have Native students, which are skewing our state data, where they'll be able to report and be mandated that they must report which tribe within the state those citizens are coming from. So that will extremely help with that data from a state level. Beyond that, moving into tribal consultations, you'll notice this is something that I've been very fortunate enough to work and advocate on, a state and national and tribal level as well. Our tribal consultation process this year is going to be with 48 school districts, and it's continued to grow depending upon the mandates in education that schools have to consult with us. Consultations have went very well. It's all about building relationships with those schools so that as we go out to attempt to assert our tribal sovereignty in education, that looks like a shared partnership with those schools. I understand from the, having multiple discussions with the BIE that there is a moratorium. There are not going to be more reservation schools. So in doing so, we know that our students are in these public schools, and it's important for our public schools to know that we're partners with them in the success of our students. We used information requests to collect data to make data-informed decisions. And moving on into those educational resources, well, actually, if you see this page right here that talks about tribal consultations, I just want to quickly note that there are comments from LEA is a local education agency, which are school districts, and administrators continue to say great things throughout our reservation about our consultation process and the resources that we're providing, the work we're doing for them. And so moving into working with the schools, we really wanted to assess, what resources do we have? Where do we need to develop further resources? What's lacking out there in public education? And how do we move forward with pushing, some more educational, Muskogee education resources? You'll notice here we have an educational trunk that we've created. And in doing so, we have curriculum with that. We've had, multiple pictures of students using that trunk in their classrooms, and that trunk has been in many classrooms, I believe over 20 just in the last few years. We developed a cultural education resource council because while we know that we're here to facilitate this work, we certainly aren't the authority in my office in terms of what cultural education looks like. So we reached out to professionals at the college. We've had elders come in. We've worked with people in the community, educational leaders, and leaders within the school districts that are Native as well to support us and how we build some of this culturally responsive education. From there, we created a culturally responsiveness training for teachers so they can understand more about our Native students and what works with our students. And we've learned that number one, we have to have a relationship as a teacher with our students. We have to. Students don't learn from teachers that they don't, respect, and that respect goes both ways. And that training has been delivered to over 1,000 stakeholders within the last few years, and we're continuing to get requests on a national level and in Indian country to share some of these resources. We created an elder videography project where we highlighted three elders and their boarding school experience. I want to note that that is housed on our website, mcnstep.com. That website is in the process of being reformulated and modernized, but I just looked at it yesterday and there's over 12,000 hits, site visits to that website that we created. This is a short video and I would encourage anyone to go see it because those elder stories are really great foundations for our students and our teachers as well to understand some of those historical effects of our people due to those boarding schools and such. We are now working through a Muskogee Studies curriculum founded off of some of this work. We have standards created, including wellness standards. I recently spoke with behavioral health, and that's a part of my priorities as well within my program, is to make sure that we're utilizing some of the services in the other departments as well, so that we know, if there are wellness factors that we see from a Muskogee perspective, that we include those in these educational standards, because for us, we know it's not just about academic success for our students, but it's about health, wellness, it's about Muskogee ideals and who we are as a nation. Within the next 2 years, we assume that we will be pushing out this Native Studies high school curriculum to many schools within our boundaries. And I also want to note that within our curriculum, educational advocates, I had heard just the last few years in Indian country had been trying to get tribal sovereignty in Oklahoma in our academics since 1993. So having those partnerships and relationships with the state education agency and others out there, I did what I could. I jumped on the horn. I heard that this is something that's needed. Tribal sovereignty needs to be understood by students. And I also knew that curriculum is not something that the state of Oklahoma mandated, but educational standards were. So as soon as I learned that in 2018 that our social studies standards were coming up to date for redrawing, I contacted our executive director of Indian Education, which I also sat on the hiring committee for that at the State Department of Education to hire that executive director. And I said, listen, we have got to get on this. We need to get those tribal sovereignty inserted. Assisted him with reaching out to other people. And I'm happy also to report that tribal sovereignty is now in multiple grade levels. It was passed through legislation in 2019. And if you go to the State Department of Education, you'll see that our social studies standards are in multiple grade levels that include tribal sovereignty and other tribal education academic standards that must be taught in social studies for our students. So that was an extreme success that when we have great people and teams of people working together, you can really build on some of that work. So again, I just wanted to highlight some of these as well. You'll notice in here that we have a teacher fellowship project that we've worked with over 48 teachers now, and we'll be including 24 more in this coming year, where we look at research. They develop resource tools themselves. These tools at the very back are education, culturally responsive teaching indicators, educational strategies, reflection questions for teachers to ask themselves. These were all created guided by research and inherent knowledge of working with our Muskogee citizens, students out in the public schools and their teachers to create standards such as these and the way that we teach our students in an appropriate way. So my work within the Department of Education has always been about doing what I can at this moment to support our students, our citizens, and all of the American Indian, Alaskan Native students in schools. But I think in doing so, the work doesn't stop with them and it doesn't start with them. We need to have our administrators on board. We need to have our teachers on board. We need to have everyone coming to the table to build a collective knowledge of how we support our students. I think that goes the same way when we're working with any agency, to know that we're partnering with them to do what we can. So moving forward, to date, I've only been working in this acting position for about 2.5 weeks now, 3 weeks. But I have, looked at some things. I began to reach out. I have a meeting next week with reintegration. I had a long meeting with Head Start about their grant and their new grant, the early Head Start. I've sat down with scholarships. There's some needs there, and I think for me, considering not only transformational leadership, but how you get everyone on the same page, but having a servant's heart in doing so. For me, knowing that as a leader, I'm not here to manage people or, to be an authoritarian figure to them, but I'm here to lead them so that they see that the work is for all of us. Last year, although I've never had, been in a position of authority in the department, I was allowed to facilitate some learning opportunities and activities for our department. And so last year, in February, I believe, of last year, I facilitated what we call an envisioning exercise. 9 people from 7 of our programs and were involved in the exercise. And I did not include that information with you, but I will tell you that this envisioning exercise looked at where we were at now, where we wanted to be in 10 years in the future, imagining us being in that position, and then tracking how we might get there. 9 of those people from those programs themselves reported that the Department of Education needed more data collection, and I certainly concur with that. I think for me, one of the biggest pushes that I have in higher education is understanding how we receive that return investment on those scholars. Who are those scholars? Who are graduating from higher education? We're tracking these students. Where are those professionals getting their degrees from? How can we then know what degrees are received so that we can bring those professional students back to our nation? They talked about employee satisfaction, and I would include to that wellness and morale for for our employees. This has been a rough year for everyone, and I want everyone on the same page. This work is not mine alone, it's for all of our department, and I want us on the same page. But again, these are self-reporting things from the people within our department. They talked about human capacity building and the need for more professional development in their areas. They talked about cultural learning and engagement and outreach, partnerships and expansion, student and youth and programming expansion, and citizen access and accommodation. And I would say that I certainly agree with all of those suggestions. I would also add in that from my perspective, after looking back at this, we weren't able, because of the pandemic, to move on some of these suggestions. So that really did stop after we had that envisioning exercise. And again, I really had no authority to influence that. I've always had my own opinions, but what I do is I take that to the secretary then and say, these are what is being said. We all as a group are, seeing these needs. I would add in at this point that I can see that there's a need for customer service requests, or excuse me, for better customer service. I've recently sent in a request for a centralized phone system, a phone tree, if you will, so we're able to answer calls in a timely manner in the last few weeks. I would add also that our language department, we've spoken about with the executive office about there potentially being a cultural department, but immediately it's about speakers. Who are our speakers? Where are they? There should be a study. We need a directory created. It's my understanding that we would have liked to have provided vaccines ASAP to these speakers, but we didn't know who they were. And so for me, that's highly important, understanding where those elders are, where those speakers are, who they are, creating that list of those speakers so they can support the mission as well,
Ms. Price,
if possible, yes.
we're going to allow a couple more minutes for you to wrap up.
You got
We're
it.
impressed for time. We'll let you finish up, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Okay?
Understood. Yes, sir, Mado. Scholarships and higher education would be my last looking ahead. How are they fielding calls? What are the core issues of funding distributions? There seems, they handle a lot of citizens and they're serving a lot of people. So we always go to managers, and I still recommend that, but I also want to seek out those regular employees that are potential leaders in their own right. Sometimes it's the people working that are entrenched in the work that know most about quality, improving quality and effectiveness. And then long-term for me is about student tracking, as I said. How do we bring those degreed workforce back to our nation? For me, it's all about futurity. I always have a big picture mindset. That's sort of my leadership style in terms of looking ahead in 10, 20, 50 years. What does that look like for our nation? How do we build sovereignty, sustainability, the work that we're doing, and keep moving it ahead for our people? Hello?
Thank you, Ms. Price. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Price?
Speaker, I got a question.
Representative Lowe?
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for being here today. I'm a alumni of the Eufaula Boarding School. It's always been a passion and will be a passion of mine. I know what it's like growing up in there. We call it a little prison, if you will. Just kidding. But one thing that concerns me was when the pandemic came, a few of us were given a report that a lot of the elementary kids were failing because they either didn't have the technology, the parents were at work. There's a reason that we were put in that boarding school. It's not like we have a mom and dad who can watch over us and just choose to miss work to raise us. One of the counselors there, she's only part-time. She has the rapport with the school, the kids' parents. She contacts these students' parents. It's always not always good communication, if you will, because no one, accountability is tough. How would you be able to, number one, support her? And if you would, what is your goal for making the boarding school a better place, a more appealing place for our tribal students to attend and live?
Mado, for that question. That's a really great question. First, I want to say that, this culturally responsive education is meant to really be delving out to others as well, that the boarding school isn't somewhere we've been to the dorm. I know that I have had connection with the superintendent at Eufaula where those students go to school, and she actually did reach out to me because she, didn't have a relationship built necessarily with other people, and because we had worked with their schools, she asked me, what can we do? So I then went directly to the secretary and said, there's something needs to be built, here. I think for the dorm, they're fortunate now to have some more funding to get some more resources. They're building on their library. They're building some infrastructure at the dorm so that they will have more services for the dorm. I believe it needs to be communicated that we should always assume the best. parents do what they know to do, school people do what they know to do, and always building from there, assuming the best, assuming that we can build a relationship with those parents, assuming that we can build a relationship with the school, and never having a moment of combativeness. You know, we don't always have to be on the same page, but we do always have to meet in the middle to do what's best for the students. And for me, that's what it's all about. Did I answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Representative Lowe. Council, any other questions? Representative Randolph?
What are your specific plans for Muskogee language revitalization?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What are your specific plans for Muskogee language revitalization?
Thank you for that question. As I mentioned before about the language department, immediately we need to create that directory. We need to know who those speakers are. How many speakers do we have? How many fluent speakers do we have? How many speakers do we have that can do some basic communication? I also believe that it's about preservation. What resources do we have? How are those being sent out or delivered to our citizens? I know that they're in the process of working through a new website. They're in the process of putting resources on a new website that they already house within their department. What resources are available? I also think it's also about looking at Yuchi language. I had a long meeting with them, and they are doing an amazing job with educating their children. I was told from them that they had a competition to see which of their students could speak in the language the most and have the longest conversation, and they had to stop students at 12 to 15 minutes where they were conversing back and forth, and they said, okay, you've done a great job. So how can we, in a sense, cross-train and utilize the great work that's going on in Yuchi language and also our Muskogee reservation? So for me, again, immediately having some sort of case study or directory about our speakers now, looking at their priorities because they have so much work going on within the department. How can we then streamline and say, these are our top 3 priorities, let's move on those and then build from there.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Randolph. Representative Crawford?
Ms. Price, how do you go about interviewing JOM instructors for the public schools?
To be honest, I'm not sure if I understand. Do you mean the JOM, the specialist within JOM department, or the parent committee?
The actual instructors at the schools.
Honestly, I've never been a part of that process itself. It's my understanding that we have our own specialists that go out to support the schools, but the instructors or the staff within JOM at the schools are a process of their own internal school district. So they're the ones that select those candidates, and they're the ones that create the terms of what their job duties and responsibilities are. And then our JOM office then assists them if there are needs with their applications and such.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Crawford. Representative Deere?
Good morning, Ms. Price.
Good morning.
In your resume, you state that you were an elementary educator and early childhood teacher at Union Public Schools. These young students are very impressionable and they're easily influenced. What is your opinion of the mascot issue?
What is my opinion? I'm sorry.
The mascot issue.
That is an excellent, excellent question. My opinion of the mascot issue is that there should not be native mascots. There's much research out there, including the White House Initiative on American Indian Education report that was created in 2015 that shows that There is a negative effect on students because of stereotypes and mascots. The APA, the American Psychological Association, also has its own statement in regards to mascots as well, saying that they do not recommend that. There is a extreme mental health concern for students. There's also been many reports about students within Oklahoma themselves that have had issues being teased or such for being Native because of these mascots being made to think, you're the mascot, look at, these things. I am against using Native mascots or Native imagery in any stereotypical way. However, I do know that we have to still work with our schools, and some of them have those mascots. So for me, in terms of connecting with what's needed in the community or what's being requested in the community, certainly that's up to that community. I'm here to advocate at a certain level, but I'm certainly not here to diminish any sort of relationships. I'm here to build relationships with those schools. So I stand behind the research, and as I advocate and go out, I look at what research says and what is being advocated from Indian country. What does NCAI say? We in fact had our own intertribal resolution in past years before I came about the negative imagery and stereotypes.
Is that how you feel personally, though? I mean, those are things that we see coming from the national news. Is that your opinion personally, being a Native person?
Yes, and I will say that, in my past, because I wasn't culturally knowledgeable, that there have been things in my own past, but that I perhaps didn't know was culturally appropriate, but I think for all of us as humans, we grow and learn. I became an adult and I've realized, and I actually advocate for some of the things that I didn't understand previously, but in growing and learning my own inherent, ways, I can say, hey, there are people out there that have, done luau's, let's say, or something, and being a part of that's not culturally appropriate. And becoming more knowledgeable myself is when I've grown to learn that there are appropriate things and there are inappropriate things. And now I can then say, I advocate for what is right.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Deere. Council?
Here.
Representative Hicks?
Ms. Price, could you tell me what would be your leadership style?
Yes, sir. Meadow for that question. I would say for me, I'm guided by my own principles and driven by my service and duty to our people. I feel as though I focus on needs and competencies. I go through my own self-actualization process and personal efficacy. I'm bound by my professional ethics. And in doing so, I have integrity. I believe in reciprocity, ethic, and moral reasoning. And I believe in shared leadership. I don't believe in authoritative coming in to say this is how it is. There needs to be a shared vision. And that comes when you have a transformational leadership style where everyone evolves to becoming on the same page.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. Representative Lowe?
Madam Speaker. Sarah, one last question from me. In your best elevator pitch, why should the National Council confirm you today?
I don't know a lot of Muskogee language. And I was listening earlier about the weakness, and I would say that is a weakness for me. But of the words that I do know the one word, which is anogechka. And that's heartfelt love. And I have that for a Muskogee. I have that for our people. I have that for the work that I do, and I'm driven by the passion to work for our people.
Hello.
Thank you, Representative Lowe. Secretary Proctor.
Good morning, Ms. Price.
Good morning, sir.
How would you colleagues describe you? How would your colleagues or someone that you've managed, how would they describe you and your management style and, you know, the kind of culture that's been presented? I know you've answered a lot of these questions, but I'd like for you to just, you know, answer, say, this is, you are approachable, someone who has a different view on things. I mean, were you able to work with that? Or, you know, anything like that that you can answer?
I would say that the people that work with me would say that I have a vision, that I make things happen, that I have grit, and that I work hard. I think I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do for myself, or I wouldn't do, excuse me, myself. I think, again, we can all have differences and opinions, but we all have the same goal of working for our children and working for our citizens. So while there may be debates back and forth, and we might not always seem eye to eye, when it comes down to it, I believe that everyone that has worked for me believes that we're all on the same path to do what we can to support the mission.
One more. And also, I know the chief has nominated you. The council will confirm you. But in the end, it's just like you said, you do work for the nation, you do work for the citizens, and also your employees. You know, I hope that relationship is there, that you can be able to work with them and show them the respect that they deserve, because you have managers in each department respectively. You know, they do know their work. You know, there is going to be a learning curve. We all understand that. That's just a comment I was wanting to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Proctor. Okay, Council, at this time, Ms. Price, thank you for your information. We'll start the regular session a little after 10, give everybody a break. At this time, this concludes the order of business. Announcements, Council. Regular session was to start at 10, but we'll start probably 10:10 maybe. Give everybody a break. Any other announcements? Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Representative Lowe made a motion to adjourn, seconded by Representative Tiger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned 10:04. We'll convene 5-10 minutes. 10 minutes.